Often when people quit smoking, they try to figure out what it's going to be like for them. And the way they do this is asking other people who quit smoking. And this really isn't going to totally answer what your quit's going to be like. Everybody's quits are different. Not only are all quits different, with other people, your own quits are different. You'll see people who quit one day had a real easy time doing it. Real easy. It was so easy that they went back to smoking because they figured they had the attitude, well, if I want to in the future, I'll just quit again. I'll just have a cigarette, and if I lose it, well, I'll just quit again. And then they find they can't do it. There's also some people now who smoke who are afraid to quit because they had quit at one time in the past, had a horrible withdrawal, horrible. And then they ended up losing that quit somewhere down the line, and now they know what's going to happen this time because of what happened last time. No, they don't know what's going to happen this time. They don't. That what this time might be totally different. It might be, it might be the same as last time, but it might be a lot better than last time. Hey, it might be worse than last time. I don't know. Nobody knows. The one thing we know is if you get through it this time, you will never have to deal with it next time if you stick to a commitment, not to take a puff again, but still contingent on that. So if you can't compare notes with yourself, with all your own past experiences, how do you think, comparing notes with a lot of other people are going to answer what your quit's going to be like? It's not. It'll give you a range. You can get some idea what it's like, for different people and what might happen and what might not. But don't be overly concerned if things happen or if things do not. There's another group, though, in today's real-world environment that sometimes people will compare notes, and it's people who are using products to quit smoking as opposed to people who are quitting cold turkey. Now, I got to point out, when you compare notes in the early stages of a quit, the first few days of a quit, you may not be able to tell a lot of difference between people who are using products and people who are not. In fact, often it'll work to the disadvantage of the person going cold turkey if they compare notes. So the other person may not seem as bad as you feel. And they think like, well, that's a better method. I mean, look, they're having an easier time. Now, I got to point out, this isn't always the case. Sometimes you'll see people using these products who are still, having a rough time with it. But well, you know what? In a lot of cases, that's not going to be the way it's going to be. It's going to be people who are using the products just seem better on day 1, in day 2, in day 3. Where the delineation will occur is you start getting more and more time under your belt. And they are thinking they're getting more and more time under their belt, but still on the product. Now, if the product is nicotine replacement, well, they still got nicotine going in their system. They're not ending that withdrawal cycle. I see on a lot of boards where they'll actually sometimes use our material. And, I have warnings in there about, be careful what you share because some of the stuff can really, infuriate other boards, because we're a cold turkey board and, boards that aren't cold turkey, they're not going to like some of the cold turkey materials. And in a true sense, should not be there. If that's the policy of the board, we don't want to, offend other boards. But there are times that some of the articles will show up, well-meaning, and they'll talk about, you just get through 3 days and things will start to get better. We're talking about specific things. And then you'll see people who are on nicotine replacements coming in a week later or 2 weeks later or a month later who are complaining bitterly. Man, they read this thing that it's only a 3-day process. And man, look what I'm going through for this long. That 3 days that we're talking about, we're talking about nicotine detox. That's what we're talking about. If someone is still using nicotine, they never started nicotine detox. I mean, they've lowered dose, but they haven't got it out of their system yet. So comparing notes in a state like that, again, in the beginning, there may be similarities. There may be advantages. But as you start getting more and more time under your belt compared to the time that they are getting, it's very different. Because in a sense, you really are becoming nicotine free. And the thoughts that you're having are triggers, they're cues to situations. But the thoughts that people who are still using nicotine are having, their body is still demanding nicotine and not getting its complement. And as they start going lower and lower in their dosages of nicotine, they're in a withdrawal process at this point where they're lowering dosage. Again, it's like people trying to cut back on their smoking. The lower it gets, the more powerful it can become. And then when they would go and quit, well, that's when they're going through what you went through in your first few days. So comparing notes with them, while it may be disadvantage in the beginning, maybe in the long run, if you compare notes with them, you can really get some very positive feedback to yourself, of what you did right. That you are not having these, you can see physical complaints, still craves, still desires, with no explanation behind it other than, I need a cigarette right now, or I need nicotine right now, or I need the patch, or I need the gum right now. I mean, that's all it is. They are looking for the delivery system. And then when you're talking to people who are on some of the medications out there, I mean, some of the side effects of these medications are profound. And you'll realize you're not having those side effects. So, again, we're dealing with real world experience here right now. So when you are dealing with people, I'm not saying don't talk to people. I've never said that when it comes down to learning about quitting smoking. I want people to talk to everybody. I want people to talk to people who've quit smoking, who are off long-term time periods, to see what their experience is like. I want you to talk to people who currently smoke today. The question I want you to ask them is, had they ever quit before? Because a lot of them had. And a lot of them had long-term quits who lost them. Find out what happened. Well, I'll tell you right now what happened. They took a puff one day. The circumstances that created that trigger, or the desire, or whatever the act was of taking that puff, they varied. But the end result was the same. You'll see people who are smoking again, who are often saying, I got to quit someday. They can't do it. You'll see, the mistake they made. You don't repeat that mistake. So talking to people who smoke can be beneficial. Talking to people who quit can be beneficial. And talking to people who are actually using products to do this can also be beneficial. Again, to make you realize you're beyond a phase that these people are in. And I don't think you're going to find yourself regretting or kicking yourself saying, man, I wish I did it that way. It doesn't usually go that way. Don't try to put their ways down. You're not going to get anywhere. And especially if you find someone who pulled it off. Not many people do, again, in real world settings. Again, you put that on a support group, they're going to say, what? Look all around the group. Everybody is doing this. They're all being pushed to do it. And sure, there's going to be plenty of people on a group that's basically designed to try to keep people or get people to use products. You're going to find a lot of people who do it. But in real world exposure, you're going to have a hard time finding people like this. People who tried it on their own, or people who tried it on their own, who quit on their own using products, okay? Those people, you're going to be hard-pressed to find who pulled it off. But if you do come across them, don't belittle what they did. In a sense, what they did was quite impressive. They took a process which they made more complicated. They made it longer in duration. And it probably took a lot more effort on their part to pull off that quit. But they pulled it off. And that's the important thing. They pulled it off. If you're talking to them, what you really want to push home with them is the importance of relapse prevention. This has nothing to do with how they quit anymore. It shouldn't put you at odds with them. But to understand, now that they've got nicotine out of their system, and again, I'm talking about people who basically, when I said successful, I meant they're off the product for a long time period. Not people are still using the product. I mean, they're still quitting. That's all that's going on. They're still in the process of quitting. But people who are off, and they have not touched a product and have not touched a cigarette. They used the product as intended, and it worked. Okay? What to share with them is they could lose that quit in an instant, having nothing to do with how they quit, just with the law of addiction, that if they take a puff on this thing again, or if they take their product again, and that's almost a more touchy subject, but if they, do it with just talking about the cigarette, if they take a puff again, they're very likely going to be in a process where they're a smoker again and have to go through quitting again. And if there's anything to get across to a group or an individual who has quit, however they quit, that's the message you need to understand. One puff and the quit's going out the window. To keep this quit, for them to keep theirs, for you to keep yours. Again, it's as simple as each of you, sticking to a commitment that you made, hopefully when you stopped, to never take another puff.